Pulse Wave. Give this character a ranged combat action. It can ignore characters, hindering terrain, and make ranged attack while being adjacent to an opposing character. Half its range until the action has been resolved. Draw lines of fire to all characters within range in every direction, including at least one opposing character. All game effects possessed or used by other characters with a line of fire drawn to them are ignored until an action has been resolved. If ignoring a game effect would cause a character with a line of fire drawn to it to no longer have line of fire drawn to it, then it is not ignored. If lines of fire can be drawn to 2 or more characters, this character's damage value becomes 1 and is locked. Make a single ranged combat attack and compare the attack total to the defense value of all the other characters with a line of fire drawn to them. Each character hit is dealt damage. So here we have Chaos King and Ganthet. They both have Pulse Wave. You can TK a character with Pulse Wave and then they could Pulse Wave. Also with Chaos King here, he has Run and Shot. So you can Run and Shot and Pulse Wave. So let's go over the rules one more time just so we can have a clear understanding, and then further on I will show an example, talk about things that Pulse Wave ignores and what Pulse Wave does not ignore. So the first thing, you half the character's range value. Here's Ganthet, he has a range of 10, Chaos King has a range of 11. You first half that. Chaos King's is actually a 6 because when you half, you round up. So he would have 6 Pulse Wave, Ganthet would have a 5. Now you must draw lines of fire to every figure within range, ignoring hindering terrain and characters. You must be able to draw a line of fire to a character to target them for the attack. If you cannot target them, then you cannot hit them with Pulse Wave, you can't attack them. So if there's a character like the new Batman from the Justice League 52 set, he has a power called Avoid Detection. When it is not your turn, lines of fire drawn to Batman are blocked unless a friendly character has taken damage this turn. In this case, Ganthet cannot target Batman unless a friendly character of Batman has taken damage. So if Batman's friendly characters have not taken damage, then you cannot draw lines of fire to him, so he will not be affected by the Pulse Wave. So it's really interesting. You must draw lines of fire first. Part 3 though, it says ignores game effects used by all figures to which you can draw lines of fire to. You cannot ignore a figure's powers if you can't target them. So that's something you really need to understand. If you cannot draw lines of fire to them, you cannot ignore them. I know a lot of people think, oh well, Pulse Wave ignores everything, so I ignore that power. If you can't target them, then you can't ignore any of their powers. So that's something that you really need to learn. There's also characters that say that a certain power cannot be ignored, such as Ulik, strongest of the rock trolls. Damage dealt to Ulik is reduced to 1. This power cannot be countered or ignored. So Pulse Wave does not affect this, so he would still be able to reduce the damage to 1 because Pulse Wave says it ignores all powers. Well, this power on Ulik says it cannot be ignored. So the card takes precedent over the power. So now that you've halved your range, you've drawn line of fire to all figures that you can draw a line of fire to, then you ignore all the powers, and then you make a ranged attack targeting all those characters. This attack can be made even if you're based. If you only target one figure, you do the full damage to that character. But if you target more than one figure, including your own figures, each figure within the Pulse Wave range would take 1 damage from the attack. So let's take a look at a demo of Pulse Wave. We have 2 teams here. One team with the green markers and then without markers is another team. So first things first, we'll have Ganthet's team do Pulse Wave. He halves his range. He has range of 10. You half that, it's range of 5. 2, 4, 5. Covers this way, so it would reach 5 this way, and obviously everyone else is well within 5 squares. So if you half his range, everyone is within range if you do that. Part 2, now you draw lines of fire to every figure within range, ignoring hindering terrain and figures' bases. Alright, so first things first, We have Ant-Man here. He is tiny size, but Pulse Wave ignores tiny size, so they do not get the +1 to their defense from a ranged attack because Pulse Wave is a ranged attack. They do not get that. Cosmo is not in range because there is no line of sight. Ganthet is on elevation 2. Cosmo is on elevation 1. This right here is blocking. If Ganthet was on the end here, then he would be able to see them down there. Same thing as Zangief. So those two are not going to be targeted. Let's go way over here to Chaos King. There's blocking terrain here. So from Ganthet to Chaos King, there is not line of sight because of the blocking terrain. Then we have Lobo. Lobo is in the same situation over here. This square of elevated terrain blocks him. Then we have Pyro. He is on elevation 1, but this square is actually the diagonal for line of sight, and he is outside of Ganthet's line of sight. So it's not going to be able to hit him. Now we have Aquaman. He's well within range and line of fire. Very easy. He will be targeted with Pulse Wave. Batman, this is the Batman. If no friendly character has taken damage, then you can't target him. Because Ganthet is attacking first, none of his friendly characters have taken any damage, so you can't target him. Even though, you know, normally you would be able to see that, but because of his power, he cannot be targeted, so Batman will not be targeted with the Pulse Wave. Now we have Robin. He ignores Hinder and Terrain, so Robin's stealth that he has from his team ability would not be in play because it ignores Hinder and Terrain. So now everyone that has been targeted, which really is Aquaman and Robin, and we have Ant-Man, those are the only three that are going to be hit from a Pulse Wave depending on the attack roll. Now part 3. Ignore game effects used by all figures to which you can draw lines of fire to. So we can draw a line of fire here, we can draw a line of fire here, we can draw a line of fire here. You roll and you hit, they would take 1 damage, 1 damage, and 1 damage. If by some chance it is just this right here, similar situation, these two you do not have line of fire on, you don't have line of fire of those two back there, and you don't have line of fire on Chaos King. So the only two figures that you potentially would have line of fire would be Batman and Aquaman. We've already said Batman in this situation can't be targeted because none of his friendly characters have taken damage. So there's only one target, Aquaman. That's a single target Pulse Wave, which does full damage. So that's something you want to notice. It's really cool. And if you take Batman out there, it's very obvious he's the only one. Just Batman happens to be on there, and there's other figures that Pulse Wave cannot ignore, and Batman is one of them, and I will cover those figures in a little bit. Now we're going to do the demo on Chaos King because he has just a little bit of different things that I want to cover. We're going to go through it a little bit quicker. He is not a flyer, but he'll skirt the bottom around here, and Pulse Wave here. Now we have to half his range, which is 6. Everyone is well within 6 squares of him, so that's not going to be an issue. Now we have to draw lines of fire. He can see Cosmo, he can see Zangief because Pulse Wave ignores characters, so those two are targeted. Aquaman is targeted. Ganthet is targeted. Ant-Man is not targeted because he's not on the edge and there's no line of fire. He just can't see him. Lobo, there's no line of fire from there. Pyro, he can see Pyro, ignoring characters. Batman, same thing, he cannot be targeted. No friendly character has been hit. And Robin, because it ignores Hinder and Terrain, which means he doesn't have stealth. So now, just again, you ignore all powers. Pyro would not get to use his energy shield deflection. You would not get impervious. You would not get super senses. You wouldn't get any damage reducers. You would get no powers, no game effects. So Pulse Wave is really, really powerful. You make your attack, targeting all characters, and then you roll the dice. In this case, he has probability, so if he missed or didn't like his first roll, he could prob it again. So, things that Pulse Wave ignores, other than the game effects and powers and things that we've already covered in this video, Pulse Wave ignores Mystic's TA, so you do not take Mystic's feedback damage when you do Pulse Wave. Pulse Wave ignores the Magneto power from the GSX set, where it halves your range because Pulse Wave targets him before the attack. His powers are ignored, including that power. Tiny size is ignored, so you do not get the +1 for range. And it ignores the gauntlet. So if you use Pulse Wave, your opponent would not get the plus to their defense if they are on those special powers later on in the gauntlet, or if your opponent chooses a certain power that may help them evade your attack, Pulse Wave would ignore those powers as well.